9 years ago, they threw me out like I was nothing. No money, no family, no future. But what if I told you that the same people who erased me are now watching their perfect world crumble because of me? The truth I uncovered will destroy them, and tonight, I'm making sure everyone knows. Want to hear how revenge tastes after nearly a decade? Hit that subscribe button and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. The air inside the Westmont Grand Ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and champagne. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a golden glow, reflecting off polished marble floors. Olivia Harrington stepped through the grand entrance, her heels clicking against the cold stone in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Conversations faltered, heads turned. A hush fell over the crowd as recognition flickered across the faces of the city's elite. Some guests exchanged puzzled glances, while others whispered behind manicured hands. At the far end of the room, Catherine Harrington's grip tightened around the stem of her champagne glass, her knuckles turning white. Her gaze, sharp as a blade, cut through the air, locking onto Olivia like a predator spotting an unwelcome intruder. "What is she doing here?" Catherine's voice, though barely above a whisper, carried a chill that sent a ripple through the nearby guests. From the side, Amelia Harrington, the golden daughter, strode forward in her designer gown, her arm linked possessively with her fiancé, James Collins. Her expression was a perfect mask of poised indignation. "You're not on the guest list, Olivia," Amelia declared, her voice honeyed but laced with ice. "I don't recall sending you an invitation." Olivia remained silent, letting the weight of the moment settle. She took her time, allowing her presence to sink in. Every step forward was measured, every movement intentional. She saw them all, faces from her past, ones that had once laughed at her, belittled her, discarded her. Then, her gaze landed on James. For a fleeting second, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. His fingers tensed around Amelia's hand. The color drained from his face, leaving only a thin mask of composure. Olivia tilted her head ever so slightly. "Surprised to see me, James?" His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed, but he said nothing. A smirk ghosted across Olivia's lips before she turned her attention back to Amelia. "Oh, don't worry," she said smoothly. "I wouldn't dream of missing such a special night. After all, family should always be there for each other, don't you think?" The word family hung in the air, taunting, heavy with irony. William Harrington, their father, stood rigid by the bar, his fingers clenched around his whiskey glass. He had yet to meet Olivia's gaze, choosing instead to sip his drink, as if drowning himself in amber liquid could erase the past. The whispers among the guests grew louder. A few took subtle steps closer, eager to witness whatever drama was about to unfold. Catherine finally spoke, her voice laced with barely contained disdain. "This is neither the time nor the place for theatrics, Olivia." Olivia smiled, calculated. "I disagree." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small envelope, crisp and pristine. With a flick of her wrist, she tossed it onto a nearby tray, right beside Catherine's untouched flute of champagne. The envelope bore the elegant gold insignia of Harrington & Co., the family's legacy, the empire that had defined them for generations. Catherine's breath hitched. William finally looked up. "You didn't really think you could erase me that easily, did you?" Olivia murmured, her voice velvet and steel. Amelia scoffed, her bravado returning in full force. "Oh, please. You were a mistake from the start. Mother and father did what they had to. You should be grateful you got as many years in this family as you did." Olivia's gaze didn't waver. "Grateful?" She let the word roll off her tongue like a foreign concept. "Tell me, Amelia, does James know? Does he know what you and our dear parents did? Or is he still under the illusion that you're the perfect, accomplished woman you pretend to be?" James stiffened beside Amelia, his grip on her hand slackened. "Know what?" he asked, his voice wary. Amelia shot Olivia a warning glare. Don't listen to her, James. She's just trying to stir up trouble. Olivia's smirk deepened. Am I? She let the silence stretch again, savoring the tension crackling in the air. Then, in a voice just loud enough for the guests around them to hear, she said, It's funny, really. You all talk about me like I was a burden, a failure, a disgrace to the Harrington name. But tell me this, if I was so insignificant, why does my absence hold so much weight? Why does my return make you so uncomfortable? Catherine's nostrils flared. William set down his glass a little too forcefully. Amelia shifted from foot to foot, her polished confidence slipping. Olivia leaned in, lowering her voice just enough to make them strain to hear. Because deep down, you know the truth, she whispered. And now, so will everyone else. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Catherine's fingers trembled as she reached for the envelope. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before tearing it open. Her eyes scanned the contents, and in that instant, for the first time in Olivia's life, she saw something in her mother's expression that looked remarkably close to fear. A slow, knowing smile curved Olivia's lips. She had their attention now, and this was just the beginning. The night Olivia was cast out of the Harrington estate, the winter air bit through her thin sweater like knives against her skin. She stood on the grand marble steps, staring at the heavy oak doors that had just slammed shut behind her, the finality of it echoing in her ears. The last thing she had seen was Catherine's indifferent expression as William turned away, his hands folded behind his back as if she were nothing more than a business deal gone sour. Amelia had watched from the foyer, wrapped in warmth and privilege, her lips curled in that ever-present smirk of superiority. You should have known better, Olivia. You never really belonged. Then the door had closed, and that was it. No money, no belongings. Nothing but a 17-year-old girl left to freeze. The city loomed before her, its skyscrapers glowing like false promises in the distance. She pulled her sleeves down over her trembling fingers, inhaling deeply, willing herself not to cry. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction, even if they weren't watching anymore. She walked, one foot in front of the other, past the iron gates of the estate that had once been her home, past the perfectly trimmed hedges, and out onto the main road. She had nowhere to go, no plan, just the weight of betrayal pressing against her ribs like a vice. By midnight, exhaustion clawed at her bones. The cold seeped in deeper, making her limbs sluggish. Her stomach twisted in hunger, but she ignored it. She wouldn't beg. Not yet. She wandered aimlessly through the city streets, eyes darting toward every open storefront, hoping for warmth. A small diner on the corner of 8th and Main caught her eye, Sunflower Diner. The neon sign flickered, buzzing in the quiet night. The windows were fogged from the heat inside, and the smell of coffee and grilled cheese drifted out when a customer left, momentarily letting the warmth escape. Olivia hesitated. She stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming softly. The woman behind the counter barely glanced up from her crossword puzzle. She was older, mid-60s maybe, with salt and pepper hair pulled into a messy bun. She wore a faded apron, her name tag reading Eleanor. Olivia kept her head down and made her way to the corner booth, hoping to disappear. Her fingers tingled as warmth returned to them, the sensation almost painful. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, a mug of coffee was placed in front of her, the steam curled in the air, the scent rich and comforting. Olivia looked up, startled, as Eleanor slid into the seat across from her. The woman didn't say anything at first, just studied her with sharp, knowing eyes. Then finally she spoke. You planning on ordering something or just taking up space? Her voice was gruff, but not unkind. Olivia swallowed, her pride warring with the ache in her stomach. I don't have any money, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor hummed as if considering this. Well, that's a problem. But I'm not in the business of letting kids starve in my diner. She leaned back, arms crossed. You work? Confused, Olivia blinked. What? You work? Eleanor repeated, nodding toward the empty kitchen. "That floor ain't gonna mop itself, and I could use an extra set of hands. You do a good job, I'll feed you. Deal?" Olivia hesitated, then nodded. Deal. That night she scrubbed floors until her fingers ached, cleared tables, washed dishes. It was humiliating, exhausting, but it was also the first time in hours she felt something other than helplessness. Eleanor didn't pry, didn't ask why she was out in the cold alone, just handed her a grilled cheese sandwich and let her eat in silence. When the clock struck 2, Eleanor tossed a set of keys onto the table. "Storage room in the back's got a cot. Ain't much, but it's warm." Olivia stared at the keys, then at Eleanor, something hot and unfamiliar rising in her chest. Gratitude. She didn't trust it, not yet, but she took the keys anyway. "Thank you." Eleanor grunted. "Don't thank me yet. You mess up my diner and you're out." Olivia didn't mess up. Days turned into weeks, then months. She worked, saved every dollar she could, learned everything Eleanor was willing to teach her, not just about running a diner, but about life, about resilience. "People take everything from you if you let them," Eleanor told her one night over a plate of fries. "You don't let them, you take it back." It was the first time Olivia allowed herself to believe she could. She enrolled in community college with the money she'd saved, working shifts between classes. She studied business, fueled by the burning need to prove, to herself, to them, that she was more than what they had discarded. She learned how to build something from nothing, how to negotiate, how to see through lies. By the time she was 23, she had earned a scholarship to a prestigious business program. By 27, she had built Vital Nutrition from the ground up, a company specializing in medical-grade supplements that revolutionized patient recovery. Investors doubted her, banks denied her, but she pushed forward, relentless, unyielding. And then the day came when she learned the truth. While preparing for an international business expansion, she needed to verify her financial history, but when she pulled up the records, she found something that sent ice down her spine. Her name, her social security number, had been used in transactions she had never authorized. Accounts opened, loans taken, tax documents filed under Olivia Harrington, but not by her. At first, she thought it was identity theft, but as she dug deeper, as she hired a private investigator to unravel the mess, the truth unraveled with it. It wasn't a stranger who had stolen her name. It was her family. The Harrington Clinic, a chain of high-end private practices owned by William Harrington, had used her identity in fraudulent tax filings. They had claimed her as an employee, funneled money through fake accounts, manipulated insurance claims. She had been nothing but a ghost in their books, a tool for their financial gain. That was when Olivia made her decision. She could have gone to the authorities immediately, could have exposed them with a single call, but that would have been too easy, too quick. They had built their empire on lies, on stolen wealth, on the illusion of perfection. She wouldn't just take them down, she would make sure they crumbled from within. So she gathered evidence, spent 2 years collecting every document, every email, every ledger that would destroy them. She moved in silence, patient, methodical, and when she was ready, she chose the perfect moment to return. The night of Amelia's engagement party, a celebration meant to solidify the Harrington legacy, a night they thought would be theirs. But Olivia had waited long enough. This time, the night would belong to her. Success didn't come easily, but Olivia had never expected it to. She built Vital Nutrition from nothing, fueled by the relentless determination that had carried her through those first brutal years of survival. She worked through nights with barely a few hours of sleep, attending business classes in the mornings and waiting tables at Sunflower Diner in the evenings. Every dollar earned was stretched, invested, turned into something greater. She learned the game quickly, the art of negotiation, the power of leverage, the necessity of patience. When doors were slammed in her face, she found windows to climb through. And when she finally secured her first investor, she made sure they never doubted her again. By the time she was 27, Vital Nutrition wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Hospitals and clinics began adopting her product lines, recognizing the groundbreaking efficiency of her formulas. Investors who once dismissed her now clamored for a seat at her table. Her name, once nothing more than a whispered disgrace among the Harringtons, was now making headlines in financial circles. Self-made CEO Olivia Harrington breaks barriers in medical innovation, from rags to riches. The woman redefining healthcare nutrition. The irony wasn't lost on her. They had erased her existence, stolen her identity for their own gain, but now the world knew her name on her own terms. But success wasn't enough. Not yet, because no matter how high she climbed, the scars of the past still burned beneath the surface. The betrayal, the lies, the years spent clawing her way out of the abyss they had thrown her into. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about balance. And balance would only be restored when they felt the same cold, unrelenting weight of powerlessness that she had once endured. The first real crack in the Harrington empire came unexpectedly. A casual conversation with her financial analyst had revealed something peculiar. Multiple offshore accounts linked to Harrington Clinic. Olivia hadn't even needed to dig too deep. The arrogance of the rich was their greatest weakness. They never anticipated that the girl they discarded would one day be in a position to expose them. She hired forensic accountants, professionals who thrived in the art of unraveling hidden fraud. What they uncovered was staggering. Millions in tax evasion, fraudulent insurance claims, illegal medical billing practices. The documents were damning, undeniable. Yet, Olivia didn't strike immediately. That would have been too easy, too merciful. Instead, she let the information simmer, feeding just enough breadcrumbs to the right places. Anonymous tips to regulatory agencies, whispers to investigative journalists, subtle financial shifts that made the Harringtons scramble without knowing where the fire had started. She watched from the shadows as the tension grew, as William began making rushed calls to legal advisors, as Amelia started distancing herself from the family's business dealings. Catherine, always the composed strategist, held firm, but Olivia knew better. She knew what fear looked like beneath a polished exterior. Then came the moment she had been waiting for. An invitation. Not from them, of course. They would rather die than willingly acknowledge her existence. But from an unexpected source. James Collins, Amelia's fiancé. His email was short, polite, yet laced with an undertone of something else. Concern, uncertainty, perhaps even regret. Olivia, I know it's been years, but I believe we should talk. I can't explain everything here, but I need to see you. It's important. She stared at the message for a long time, considering. James had been Amelia's trophy, the perfect, respectable businessman who fit seamlessly into the Harrington dynasty. But Olivia remembered a different version of him. The hesitant glances, the quiet doubts, the way his grip had faltered in hers when they were younger. He had been part of the facade, but he had never been fully theirs. And now it seemed he was starting to realize that. She agreed to meet. They chose a neutral place, an upscale restaurant downtown, far enough from the social circles that would gossip, yet discreet enough for high-profile clientele. James arrived first, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, but Olivia noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way he rubbed his thumb against the rim of his glass. When she slid into the seat across from him, he exhaled sharply, shaking his head. God, Olivia, I almost didn't believe it when I saw your name again. She simply tilted her head, studying him. And what exactly did you believe, James? His jaw tightened. He hesitated, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. That you were gone for good. He swallowed. That you wouldn't come back. Olivia took a sip of her wine, letting the silence stretch between them. Then, With a soft smile, she asked, "And why does that scare you?" James flinched. It was barely noticeable, but she caught it. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing around as if afraid someone might overhear. "You don't understand what's happening, Olivia." She laughed, low and amused. "Oh, I understand perfectly." "No, you don't." His voice dropped further. "The clinic? The money? It's worse than you think. I didn't see it at first, but now. Amelia has been lying to me. Catherine has been covering up things that—" He exhaled sharply. "William is desperate, and desperate men make dangerous choices." Olivia leaned forward, her expression calm, unwavering. "And what is it you want from me, James?" His hands clenched into fists on the table. "I want to know the truth. I want to know why they've been so afraid ever since your name came back into the picture." She regarded him for a long moment, then reached into her purse. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled out a small black USB drive and placed it between them. "You want the truth?" she murmured. "Here it is." James stared at the device as if it held the weight of the world. When he looked back up at her, his expression was unreadable. "I don't know what to do with this," he admitted. Olivia smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't warm, wasn't cruel, just inevitable. "You don't have to. The choice has already been made." James exhaled, leaning back in his chair as realization dawned. They weren't just standing on the edge of something dangerous. They had already stepped off the cliff. The Westmont Grand Ballroom pulsed with artificial warmth, chandeliers glittering overhead as champagne flowed freely. The Harringtons had mastered the art of grandeur, curating an illusion of untouchable wealth and power. But tonight, the foundation of that illusion was cracking. Olivia stood in the heart of it all, her presence an unspoken threat, a ghost resurrected from the past. The envelope she had left on the tray sat untouched beside Catherine's champagne, though Olivia could see the older woman's fingers twitching, itching to reach for it. Amelia, ever the perfect socialite, recovered first, plastering on a dazzling smile as she looped her arm through James's. "It's adorable, really," she purred. "You've come all this way just to stir up a little drama. Should we applaud your dedication?" Olivia arched a brow, unfazed. "Oh, Amelia, still convinced that a polished performance can cover the rot underneath?" Her voice was soft, almost amused, but there was an edge beneath it, one Amelia recognized immediately. Catherine finally moved, plucking the envelope from the tray with an air of detached curiosity. She slid a manicured nail beneath the seal, unfolding the papers within. Her expression barely flickered, but Olivia saw it. The momentary tightening of her jaw, the slight narrowing of her eyes. A trained audience might not have noticed, but Olivia wasn't just any audience. William stepped forward, his usual composed demeanor barely holding. "What is this?" His voice was low, meant for her ears alone, but the weight of it carried. Olivia met his gaze, unwavering. James, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Proof of what, exactly?" Olivia didn't look at him. Instead, she took a slow step forward, ensuring everyone within earshot could hear her next words. "Proof that Harrington Clinic has been committing tax fraud for over a decade. Proof of falsified patient records, illegal insurance claims, and embezzled funds funneled through offshore accounts under my stolen identity." The crowd stilled. Champagne flutes halted mid-air. The buzz of murmurs swelled like an incoming tide. William's face darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about." Olivia laughed, quiet but cutting. "Oh, but I do, and so will the authorities." She tilted her head, letting her words sink in. "I wonder, William, when the IRS and the Medical Ethics Board come knocking, how long will it take before your carefully crafted empire collapses?" Catherine, always the tactician, stepped in. "This is ridiculous. If you had any real evidence, you wouldn't be standing here making a spectacle." She waved a dismissive hand. "Empty threats won't get you what you want." Olivia smiled. "You're right. She reached into her clutch, pulling out a sleek black USB drive, holding it up between her fingers. "This will." Catherine's carefully controlled mask faltered for the briefest second. James exhaled sharply. "Jesus Christ." Amelia scoffed, but there was something brittle in the way she clutched her champagne flute. "So what? You think you can just waltz in here, throw around baseless accusations, and we'll fall apart?" She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You were always so desperate for attention, Olivia." Olivia regarded her sister with mild curiosity. "Is that what you're telling yourself? That this is some petty revenge play?" "Oh, Amelia," she sighed, almost pitying. "You've spent so long basking in the glow of their lies. You don't even recognize the truth when it's staring you in the face." Amelia stiffened. "You're pathetic." "No," Olivia corrected, voice even. "I survived." Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then suddenly the crowd parted. A man strode forward, his presence sending a ripple of recognition through the room. Dr. Richard Montgomery, Chief Medical Officer of Memorial Hospital, one of Harrington Clinic's largest affiliates. His face was thunderous. "William," Montgomery bit out, voice dangerously low. "Is this true?" William remained rigid, but Olivia saw the flicker of calculation in his eyes. He was assessing, weighing his options, searching for a way out. Catherine, ever composed, spoke instead. "This is nothing but a fabrication." She turned to Olivia, her tone clipped. "We won't stand here and entertain these delusions." Olivia smirked. "Then I suppose you won't mind if Dr. Montgomery sees this." She stepped forward, pressing the USB into Montgomery's hand. "Every falsified document, every fraudulent transaction, every single piece of evidence tying the Harrington Clinic to illegal financial operations." She tilted her head. "I'd say it makes for some fascinating reading." Montgomery glanced down at the drive, then back at William. His lips thinned. "If this is real, your career is over." William finally cracked. His voice, always so measured, wavered. "Richard, you have to understand." But Montgomery was already turning, his expression set. "I'll be reviewing these documents immediately. If what she claims is true, we'll be severing all ties with Harrington Clinic and reporting this to federal authorities." Panic flickered in Amelia's eyes. "You can't be serious." "Oh, he is," Olivia said smoothly. "And so is the investigative journalist I sent a copy to." Catherine inhaled sharply. William clenched his fists. The weight of inevitability bore down on them. Olivia stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough so only her family could hear. "For years you stole from me, took everything and left me with nothing. Now, I'm simply returning the favor." Amelia, for the first time, looked truly afraid. Catherine exhaled, slow and controlled. "You always did have a dramatic flair, Olivia." Olivia chuckled, genuinely amused. "And you always did underestimate me." Before anyone could respond, a security officer approached William, murmuring something in his ear. Whatever was said made William's face go deathly pale. Olivia already knew. The authorities had arrived. As uniformed figures moved through the crowd, whispers turned to gasps, scandalized voices overlapping. The once unshakable Harrington name was unraveling in real time. William turned to Olivia, desperation flickering in his gaze. "This is your family too." Olivia considered him for a long moment, then shook her head. "No," she said, finality in her tone. "Not anymore." As William was led away, Catherine remained still. Shoulders squared, chin high, unwilling to crumble before an audience. Amelia, on the other hand, looked completely undone, her carefully curated world crashing around her. James stepped away from her, his expression unreadable. "You lied to me," he murmured, "about everything." Amelia opened her mouth, but nothing came out. And just like that, Olivia turned on her heel, stepping out of the ballroom without another glance back. The Harrington dynasty had fallen, and she had been the one to bring it down. The crisp night air greeted Olivia as she stepped out of the Westmont Grand Ballroom, the echoes of scandal and whispered betrayals still lingering behind her. The city stretched before her, alive with the hum of traffic, the distant murmur of late-night conversations, the rhythmic pulse of a world that had moved on without the Harringtons at its center. She inhaled deeply, the scent of rain-soaked pavement grounding her in the present. The weight that had settled on her chest for years had finally lifted. The past no longer owned her. Her phone buzzed in her clutch, a message from an unknown number flashing across the screen. "You did it." She stared at it for a moment before typing back. It was overdue. No name, no need for one. James Collins had made his choice the moment he realized just how deep the lies ran. Whether he would try to salvage what remained of his reputation or disappear into the shadows like the rest of them was no longer her concern. He was just another piece of collateral damage in a war that had already been won. She turned down a quieter street, her heels clicking against the pavement as she approached a familiar neon glow. Sunflower Diner, the place that had given her shelter, that had given her purpose when she had nothing else. The bell above the door chimed softly as she stepped inside, the warmth instantly enveloping her. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon wrapped around her like a forgotten memory. Behind the counter, Eleanor barely glanced up from the newspaper she was skimming. "Figured I'd see you tonight," she said, flipping a page, her tone as gruff as ever. "News broke an hour ago. Whole city's talking." She tapped a finger against the bold headline. "Harrington family collapses amid fraud scandal." Olivia slid onto a stool, eyeing the paper with mild amusement. The accompanying photo was of William being escorted out of the Westmont, his expression caught between fury and defeat. "Took them long enough," Olivia muttered, reaching for the coffee mug Eleanor set down in front of her. The older woman smirked, finally meeting her gaze. "So, what now?" Olivia exhaled, stirring the black coffee absent-mindedly. For the first time in years, she didn't have an immediate answer. Every step of her life had been dictated by a singular goal: exposing the Harringtons, reclaiming what was stolen, proving to the world that she was never the failure they had cast aside. But now that the war was over, she found herself standing at the edge of an unfamiliar silence. Eleanor must have sensed it because she leaned forward, resting an elbow on the counter. "Let me guess. You spent so damn long chasing revenge, you forgot to figure out what comes after." Olivia huffed a quiet laugh. "Something like that." The older woman shrugged, unbothered. "Good. Means you're still breathing." She poured herself a cup, taking a slow sip before continuing. "Let me tell you something, kid. Justice is nice, revenge is satisfying, but neither one is going to keep you warm at night." Olivia tilted her head, considering the words. "And what does—" Eleanor's lips quirked in a knowing smirk. "Life." The answer was simple, and yet it hit Olivia harder than she expected. For years she had been driven by anger, by survival, by the need to see the people who had destroyed her crumble under the weight of their own sins. But beyond that, beyond the carefully laid plans and whispered threats, she had never allowed herself to think about what a life outside of war looked like. Could she even remember how to exist without the fire of vengeance burning in her chest? A movement by the door caught her attention. A young woman had stepped inside, hesitant, eyes darting around the diner like she didn't belong. Olivia recognized that look instantly. She had worn the same one the night she had stumbled in all those years ago. The girl was barely more than a teenager, her clothes rumpled, the exhaustion in her posture unmistakable. Eleanor noticed, too, setting her cup down with a quiet sigh. "Looks like we got another stray," she muttered, before calling out, "You hungry, sweetheart?" The girl hesitated, but then nodded. Olivia watched as Eleanor disappeared into the kitchen, her heart tightening with something unfamiliar. Not sadness, not regret, just clarity. She had spent years obsessed with taking back what was stolen, but maybe the true victory wasn't in reclaiming the past. Maybe it was in making sure that no one else had to live through the same kind of exile. She reached into her purse, pulling out a worn envelope she had carried for years but never had the chance to use. It was a check, an old promise she had made to herself long ago. When Eleanor returned, she slid it across the counter. The older woman arched a brow. "What's this?" Olivia took a sip of her coffee, savoring the warmth before answering. "A future." Eleanor unfolded the paper, eyes scanning the numbers scrawled across the check. It was enough to keep Sunflower Diner running for years, enough to turn it into something bigger, a shelter, a sanctuary, a place where people like Olivia, people who had nowhere else to go, could find their footing again. Eleanor stared at her for a long moment, then let out a slow, exasperated breath. "You're a pain in my ass, you know that?" Olivia smirked. "Yeah, but I'm also right." The older woman shook her head but didn't argue. She simply folded the check, slipping it into her apron pocket. "Guess I better start hiring." Olivia glanced back at the girl still hovering near the entrance, watching the world with wary eyes. She knew that feeling. She knew that fear. For the first time in a long time, she knew exactly what came next. She stood, smoothing the creases from her dress, and walked over to the girl. "You ever worked in a diner before?" The girl blinked, surprised by the question. "No." Olivia nodded as if that didn't matter. "Good. Neither had I." She gestured toward an empty stool at the counter. "Sit, eat, then we'll talk." The girl hesitated, then moved toward the seat. Eleanor set a plate of food in front of her without a word. Olivia slid back onto her stool, watching as the young woman took her first tentative bite. Justice had been served. The Harrington name was ruined. The empire they had built on stolen lives and broken promises had crumbled beneath the weight of its own sins. But this was something more. This was building something new. This was living. And for the first time in 9 years, Olivia was ready to begin.